mountains, stretching from salt water to the high peaks of the interior. Here, wood is the king post of the economy, providing 50% of the livelihood of the people. Logs are the great cash crop, which move over hundreds of miles of roads and railways to markets at the manufacturing centers. The prevention of accidents is a serious concern of alert loaders, truckers, and trainmen. Men who understand their jobs, the hazards, and the means of avoiding them can and do haul thousands of loads each day safely to their destinations. The beginning of the day at a truck logging camp finds the crew gathering around the bus them to the woods. Hard hats stand out even in light. The first trucks are already on their way to the landings. The safety of the log hauling operation begins with the constant inspection and thorough maintenance of the trucks. An experienced driver has a fixed routine for checking his rig before leaving camp each morning. Changes into his logging hat first. He takes an interest in the truck he drives. It's a big truck and a big responsibility. He personally checks the water and the level of the crankcase oil before starting the motor. With the first turn of the motor, he will check two important instruments. The oil pressure gauge and the ammeter. The steering gear of this truck was repaired last night in response to a written report by the driver. Knowing the importance of the steering gear to the safe operation of the truck, the shop's dayman explains what has been done and makes sure the driver is satisfied with the repair. Before making his round of the truck, the driver sees that the fire extinguisher and first aid kit are in the truck and securely stowed in their proper places. While the motor is warming up, he tries the air tank drain cock to see that it is tightly closed. Well-inflated tires are proved by the sound when struck with a loaded pipe or hammer. The air valves and coupling are checked. Knowing that his own life and the lives of others depend on the condition of the truck, he does everything he can to ensure against equipment failures. This systematic inspection takes little time, but covers many points. Next, he tests his windshield wipers and cleans the glass thoroughly. He checks the lamps while wiping the headlights and starts the day with a clean windshield. The air is up and the gauges are working. The truck is ready to go. The day's work begins. A day of driving and constant testing of equipment. For if something is wrong, the driver must discover it while there is still time to prevent an accident. On logging roads, the crew buses should always go ahead of the trucks. Before we follow the trucks out to the landings, let's look in on the beginning of a shift at a railroad operation. Railroads, too, are an important part of the log transportation system. Railroaders are famous for the faithful inspection and maintenance of the rolling stock. Air brakes and sanders get special attention. Years of experience have proved that train crews should be given definite orders regarding train movements. The cars take a beating on a railroad logging show, but they must be kept in safe mechanical condition. Railroaders have developed hand signals that can be unmistakably recognized at long distance by the engineer. Couplings are vital parts and are frequently inspected. Coupling pins should drop freely, and drawbars should not work too stiffly. The wise brakeman gets in the clear and stays in the clear. He never kicks the drawhead or attempts a last-second lineup. He makes the couplings exactly the same way each time, checking the pins to make sure they have dropped, cracking the hot valve before opening it all the way. Men releasing handbrakes should have plenty of leverage before pulling the dog. Clean, undamaged ratchets and dogs are one result of a good maintenance program. Throughout the shift, by being alert, each man can protect himself and the rest of the crew from hazards caused by careless operation or failure of the equipment. We'll see more of these cars as they are loaded during the day. But now let's get back to the trucks. One of them has just arrived at the landing. The entire crew at the landing must work together to maintain safe working procedures and habits. The driver waits until the loader signals and then sounds his horn before backing up. He keeps his eye on the loader, who watches the area behind the truck. When the truck is spotted, the crew goes to work as a team, each man having definite duties in preparing the truck for loading. Everyone is in the clear when the trailer is lifted. The coupling is an approved type of the right size for the job. Safety chains are now required on many operations. A special strap, not a molly, is used to lift the trailer. The driver is responsible for the air and water connections. As his life will depend on them, he takes a keen interest in hooking them up right. When the truck is ready, the men get in position for loading. The head loader is the man in charge of the landing. Good loads depend on his skill in picking the right logs in the right order. Here, a shovel loader crew is getting out logs felled and bucked during road construction. In all loading, for the safety of the men and equipment, the utmost care must be taken to avoid dropping the logs. For the safety of everyone else who comes near the trucks, the loading crew must build proper loads, beginning with a bunk tier that fills the bunk without crowding the box. The loading engineer has an unobstructed view of the situation from his position in the cab of the shovel loader. Hard hats, sharp eyes for logs that might roll, and the ability to keep out from under are musts for personal safety around the landing. A clear hand signal is always given before a log is lifted. The engineer protects the men and equipment by careful handling of the logs. With a peanut whistle, the loader on the truck can give signals that can be heard by the whole crew. The loader never stands between the cab and the load while logs are in the air. He stays on his platform until the log is laid down. Good boots, sharp, clean cocks, and catty footwork are the real defense against slips and falls. Experienced loaders frequently chop away thick bark, so the tongs will get a good grip on the log. The tongs must be the right size, in true alignment, and very sharp, and are set squarely across and well around the log. They bite deep into solid wood as the log is lifted. These tongs will hold fast as the log is maneuvered onto the load. The bigger the log, the more damage it can do if it is dropped. Loaders who know their business keep a set of slings ready at hand and do not hesitate to use them when there is the slightest doubt as to whether tongs will hold or not. When a big log is loaded, it should be cradled between two small logs or substantial blocking. This system widens the base of the load and gives the big log proper support to prevent its rolling off the bunks. Now let's move to a heel boom landing and watch a good crew work together in resetting an upset bunk block. A responsible head loader will not work or let a man work under a suspended log. He has it swung out of the way. Clear, definite hand signals are used to avoid misunderstandings between the members of the crew. Whenever a man has to get close to a truck that is being loaded, he must, for his own protection, make sure the rest of the crew knows where he is. The man is back in the clear before the log is again swung over the truck. While bunk blocks are generally used where the logs are big, stakes are strongly recommended where smaller logs are most common. Every log on a completed load must be firmly saddled. Before the truck is moved, the driver pulls the reach travel pin and makes sure the hoses have not been damaged during loading. Loads of this size are never seen on public highways, but are common on the hundreds of miles of private roads built and maintained by logging operators. Only well-built loads should leave the landing, for a poor load is a hazard to everyone who comes near it. The binders are no substitute for a good load, but may prevent spilling the logs in unusual situations. When water is used to cool the brakes, it is turned on before the brakes get hot. This avoids cracking the drums. A last check of the air, and the trip begins. As the truck comes downhill, it must be kept under positive control. Mechanical failure would be disastrous. Here is where the driver's inspection of his rig pays off. The brakes are the only restraint to the tremendous weight of the truck and load. They must be in good repair and adjustment. Where the road is narrow, empty trucks pull into turnouts to let the loaded trucks go by. And they stay there until the road can be seen through the dust. On private roads, long logs are frequently carried. The driver should always allow for the sweep of the load. The reach of the load sweeps the inside of the curve, and the overhang sweeps the outside. When the loads coming out of the woods on trucks are reloaded to cars by solid transfer, they must not only be safe truckloads, but good carloads as well. Just below every railroad landing, a derail is set to stop a runaway if the string of cars gets loose. At a dump and reload, we can see some of the special points that come up in railroad logging. When empty cars are moved in for loading, head loaders should see that the whole crew gets clear of the spotting or snubbing line. Good carloads of logs are much the same as good truckloads, but special care must be taken to have any long logs on the center of the bunks to keep loads from bumping together on the inside of curves and to leave room to operate the handbrakes. Now let's go back to one of the landings. At this landing, trucks are loaded for public highway hauling. Trucks and loads that move on the highway are comparatively small. The total width of the loaded rig cannot be over 8 feet. Height, weight, length, and overhang of the load are also limited by highway regulations. Only well-built loads, without projecting stubs or branches should leave the landing. The driver gives warning before tossing the binders over. The load must be stable and well balanced. Binders are used purely as a safety measure. They must never be weakened by the use of mollies or cold shut links. With a well-built load and a well-maintained truck, the driver starts his run knowing that safe delivery of the load is up to him. At a convenient spot near the entry to the highway, the driver gets out and checks the lay of the load, the tightness of the binders, and the condition of the stakes or bunk blocks. He makes sure there are no dangling chains before proceeding to the highway entrance. Before entering a public highway, the driver stops and looks both ways. From this point to the end of his run, the experienced driver gives every consideration to highway regulations and to the rights of other people using the road. Good steering is the mark of a professional driver. This fellow's skill and judgment show up in the way his truck takes the curves. Let's see how the road looks from the cab of one of these trucks. The driver of this truck might very well be its owner. If so, he's got $20,000 or $30,000 in it, and he's not taking any unnecessary chances. He likes to drive, and he's proud of his skill. He knows every bend and crossing on his route, and the safe speed for every foot of it. His object in driving is not to get ahead of the other fellow, but to think ahead of him. If our driver had time to talk, we'd probably hear something like this.
The road seems clear. Other people sticking to their side. Is it clear around the next bend? Can't guess about it. Not ever. Not with 15 tons of logs riding the backs of our necks. Look at those tracks. Got to be ready for that kind of driver. That's a blind junction ahead. It's our right-of-way. Better slow down anyway. Some other fella might be feeling lucky. Maybe he saw us. Maybe he didn't. Got to be ready for those that don't see us. Narrow bridge, 10 miles an hour for trucks over 10 tons. That's what the sign says. Okay, by us. We want to see who else is on that bridge before we get on it. This isn't a posted speed zone, but a lot of cars and trucks pull off or on the road here, and we have to watch for them. We're on the lookout for that school bus. Those red lights or something. Most of them have stop signs, but they all mean stop to traffic going both ways. Seems this fella can't decide what he's going to do. Pass him? Not us. Better lay back and see what happens. That's what happens. And that's what happens. And that's what happens.
Anyone following this truck can see how it hugs the right side, giving oncoming traffic all the room possible. Something every log truck can and should do. If a truck is forced to stop along the highway, warning flags or flares must be set out immediately. Trucks following one another should maintain the legal spacing, giving faster traffic a chance to pass one truck at a time. On both private and public roads, proper spacing cuts the risk of rear-end collisions. Another way to make friends on the road is to use the wide shoulder or turnout lane when autos want to pass on a hill. Whether there's a weighing station on the route or not, gross weights and axle loadings must not exceed the legal limit. Most trips end at a log dump at a mill pond or on towable water. Even if he has to wait his turn at the unloader, the driver should remember, do not loosen binders until unloading straps are tightened. Yes, the last act of a successful trip is no time to take the chance of a rolling log. When the unloading straps have been tightened, they will positively catch and hold any loose log, so it cannot roll off the truck onto the men when the binders are released. Drivers, supervisors, and the log dump crew should and must work together to see that this procedure is enforced. When the bunk chains are released and the men have moved well into the clear, the load is ready to dump. All through the region, hundreds of mills and thousands of jobs depend on loads like this. Safe loads, safely delivered. And the job goes on. The bunk chains are inspected immediately and hung up securely. The trailer is bound to the truck for the return trip to the landing. Oil pressure, generator, air, all okay. And away he goes for another load. And when this day's work is done, let's remember the thorough maintenance, the well-built loads, and the careful driving, the cooperation among many people for safety that goes into hauling logs.